The world is full of tours. But you don't choose a Toyota truck to follow the beaten path. You choose it to find the places in between. The detours, where each adventure pulls you toward the next. And wrong turns turn out right. So why would you ever take a tour when you could take a detour? Toyota Trucks.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything.
I'm Sarah Edmondson.
And I'm Anthony Nippy Ames, and this is A Little Bit Culty.
We woke up from a cult, and that journey was captured in The Vow on HBO and in my memoir, Scarred.
Now, in this podcast, we break down the shame and secrets that make these experiences so destructive with honest conversations on how seemingly benign groups can cross into the cultiverse and how to spot and recover from trouble if it happens to you.
Each week, we bring in experts, survivors, and whistleblowers to explore red flags, resilience, and even share a few laughs, because sometimes you gotta laugh.
Subscribe to our Patreon for early and ad-free listening, some live Q&A, and exclusive content at patreon.com/alittleBitCulty.
Welcome to Season 8 of A Little Bit Culty. Welcome back, everybody, to Part 2 with Danny Rensch, international chess master, broadcaster, chief chess officer at chess.com, and all-around amazing person.
So if you haven't listened to the first part, you know the drill. Welcome back to Part 2, everyone.
And before we get into the history where we promised we would leave off, we have to say the audible that you performed was so good, Danny. And I don't know if you know this, but I also do voiceover. It's very, very difficult to narrate an audible. And you fucking, not only did you nail it, but you should consider a career of voiceover.
Really?
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. It was so hard, honestly.
It's difficult. I mean,
Your Russian accent was
Igor.
amazing.
Thank you.
We have to talk about Igor at some point.
We'll get it.
Igor, I promise Igor will be in this timeline in Part 2 because he has to be.
I think it was actually when Igor was introduced that I was like, this better be a series. This better be a series or a movie. And I'm already casting it in my head.
I was like, Igor's a movie, or it's like a 2 or 3 episodes of an 8-episode, 9-episode.
Yeah.
It's so definitive, and it's such an important part of your process.
It's been interesting because we've gotten a lot of advice and we're going to get into the timeline, but we've been told like, hey, movie, like series, like maybe doc first. Like there's been a lot of interest because a lot of people, when they get into it, they're like, wow, this is maybe more than you could fit into a proper movie. Yep. So Igor having his own middle of a series makes sense.
I'm voting for a limited series, but we'll come back to that. Okay. So I know our audience will be dying to know. So you grew up, we've set the scene for the collective and your world in this village. When did chess come into the picture? Tell us about that moment.
I'm going to very quickly answer the question of what happened with my mom and dad.
Sure, yes.
My dad rose in status and ultimately became the number 2 directly because hierarchy was an open discussion within the collective. So my dad was literally ranked the number 2 man behind Stephen Camp. And he left my mom after I was born. I was 6 weeks old, and he left my mom and married Stephen and Trina's oldest daughter, Marlo, who was 19 years old. He was 38 at the time. And that was a not so uncommon thing, unfortunately, men leaving their wives and marrying younger women. You know, again, not going to go off on a bad timeline, but just to plant the seed that my wife's father left her mother and married the second oldest daughter of Stephen and Trina with a very similar age gap. Only difference was my wife's mom, Kathy, left the collective, sort of fled and was kind of pushed out because of politics. And they left, Kathy would say later, because she didn't want her kids to ever be taken from her, which is an ironic fear given that her oldest daughter eventually married me. And we're going to get to that now. So what happened to my mom after my dad left her was that she was on the bottom of the totem pole. And again, when you're at the bottom, exact ranking is less important, but she was essentially the scarlet lettered previous woman of my dad. And so as far as I was concerned, like, that didn't mean a lot to me. In fact, I didn't even know my dad was my dad until I was 8 years old, which would happen later on for reasons we'll get into. But it just sets the stage to say that I was a village kid, the bastard child of Steve Rensch, who's the number 2 in the collective, who I didn't even know was my father, and generally living a typical sort of village kid lifestyle until the summer of 1995, which is when I discovered chess. And discovering chess, I would learn later, I'm a part of a large generation of chess players who all got into chess for the same reason, which was the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer. Anyone who hasn't seen that movie, it is a phenomenal movie.
It's a great movie. Yeah.
Whether you like chess or not, Ben Kingsley, Lawrence Fishburne, Joe Mantegna, great movie. And I was captivated by this movie at a time when, why were we not outside like we normally were as kids in the village? That particular summer, and this is maybe one of the only stories I really regret that isn't in the book, because it was in the earliest manuscript, How Did Danny Get Into Chess? But the reason maybe I got really good at chess combined with this movie was because that particular summer, we were all pretty much under house arrest. And the reason is that summer was when the collective came under attack by a number of different local people who were actively trying to run kids off the road. I was actively ran off the road and hid under the Double D Bridge. Anyone who knows Town Village knows exactly what I'm talking about when I say the Double D Bridge, which is the only bar and restaurant in the village. And, they would yell at us, fucking freaks. And there was someone who showed up with a gun on the school campus. The school was named the Shelby School, named after Stephen and Trina's second daughter, who my wife's father left her mother for, but again, complicated. But the Shelby School was the name of the collective school, and they showed up with a gun. And so everyone was scared. In particular, Stephen and Trina were scared that there may be some sort of act of violence. And so they hired bodyguards, like legit bodyguards. These weren't like, men in the collective who got guns, right? These were professional bodyguards who were brought in, and they mainly lived and patrolled Stephen and Trina's house, which that summer I lived in the small cabin, the little red cabin, as it was called, which is between the water tank, Trina and Stephen's house, and then the little red cabin. So I was living in that cabin with my mom and another family at the time. And the fact that the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer inspired me to play chess, and we weren't allowed to play outside like we normally would, I think those two things coming together, in hindsight, were sort of lightning in a bottle, because Dallas, who's my stepbrother, the oldest son of Marlo, my dad's new wife from a previous marriage of hers when she was 16, yes, complicated, Dallas and I both got obsessed with chess. And so we were playing in secret, and we would like run to each other's houses because we weren't allowed to be outside very long. We set up this plastic chess set, and we would pretend to play as fast as we could, like the hustlers in the park from the movie. We would slam a book next to us, pretending that it was a clock. And so we were obsessed with chess, not able to play outside. And then the third thing that I think, really came together that ended up just making chess what it was for the rest of my life was that summer was also the start of the world championship match between Garry Kasparov and Viswanathan Anand. There are always world championship matches, but that was a very special world chess championship because it was being held in New York, which was the first time the world chess championship had been on U.S. soil in a very long time, which meant that mainstream Western media was actually covering the event, which at that time, really didn't happen very much. In fact, it probably, you could say, was getting more mainstream Western press than any world championship since the Bobby Fischer World Championship in 1972, when he beat Boris Spassky, which was a big deal because of the USSR-US Cold War. And so, Again, I think when you tell these stories, it's always like, oh, you got lucky or these things. But sometimes when you unpack things, you go it's really interesting to see that with perspective, multiple factors, I think, had to come together to really just cement that chess was going to be a part of my life for the rest of my life. And that was the summer into the fall of 1995. And those were all the things that were happening.
You read the book Outliers?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It has a little bit of that feel to it. Yeah.
Not to mention that your guru, or the person that's sort of giving you life lessons, then tells you also that it's your purpose with a capital P. What does that mean in the collective for you?
Yeah. So I explained those three things. The thing that came with that was that Stephen Camp, the leader of the cult, for any of his faults, genuinely loved chess. And he was also actively following the world championship match. And so before we even get to what would happen, which was that me and Dallas and a lot of the other kids would get very, very good at chess. And then Dr. Duran would ordain chess as my purpose at a very young age. Before that even happened, I guess the final nail in the coffin, now I'm drawing a diamond of these things that came together, was Stephen Camp's obsession with the idea that, oh, these kids are really into chess. And he loved chess. And so he took us to our first tournament. Within a very short amount of time, the chess team was expanding beyond Danny and Dallas. And we got very, very good, very, very fast. Within a year, I was already one of the highest rated players in the country for my age. We took fourth at a national championship we never would have gone to if it wasn't in Tucson and we could afford to drive. We then won the next national championship, which was the first ever Super Nationals in Knoxville, Tennessee. So overnight, the Shelby School, a school no one had ever heard of, it's rumored that there's a cult there. I don't really know. This is how the chess world would talk about it, maybe, right? Suddenly the Shelby School, from this small remote place in Tono Village where people have heard rumors of a cult, is objectively the best scholastic chess team like in the country, right? Led by a player who then at the age of 12 was already an All-American, and that was me. That was a huge part of like what changed everything, was that group of kids and the program that we had, the rigorous chess training they were giving us, is unlike anything I think that has like ever been done in chess since. And as someone who now sits in a spot where I know about a lot of chess programs and I know what a lot of curriculums look like, I could say that I've never seen anything like that, because you wouldn't have 2 hours of chess every day after school, 8 hours of chess every weekend, not to mention chess at home, and just the level of pressure and motivation that kids were given by the leaders of a cult. You would never have that unless you were probably in a cult, right? I mean, literally, like the program that we had has never been replicated. And so that's how we went from, literally the bottom to the top as quickly as we did. And just to get to your point, eventually I was then told by Dr. Duran that chess was my purpose, which, last thing to say is that purpose in the collective is one of the founding pillars of why people are there, or what keeps them, adhering themselves to the teachings of Duran. And in part one, we talked a little bit about, the potentially useful or interesting aspects of believing you're a spiritual being having a physical experience. If that by itself led to the idea that your spirit has a purpose and that we are all here for a purpose and we all want to believe that we have purpose on the planet, you go, okay, sign me up. Sounds good. I want to believe I have purpose. And in many ways, that idea can be inspirational. But when it came to the idea of purpose in the collective, purpose was not just your spiritual reason for being on the planet, but on the one hand, it could also just be your job. Like sometimes someone was given a purpose and it was ordained as super important, but actually it was just like my mom's purpose was to clean the collective houses. And then she started a cleaning business like outside of just the collective houses. But generally it was like, that was like something that the collective needed. So she did it. At the age of 12, where I was told by Duran that your purpose is chess and you need to embrace your purpose. And this is the reason you're on the planet. And this is all you're going to do for the rest of your life. Right. And so those are like a couple examples, but purpose is a very big deal. And it was really the thing that your whole self-worth and everything you did from the rest of your time was sort of measured by how you were performing in your purpose.
Was that more or less exciting to you than being able to eat at McDonald's on the way to and from the tournaments? Way
less exciting. In fact, what's funny is, and I share this in the book, like when I was told my purpose in this trance, it's even every time I remember, it literally feels like an outer body experience. Like, because every time I'm like, simultaneously, like I knew it was coming because of course this was going to be the thing. Also, like it didn't feel good. It almost felt like a discipline. It's like you need to like get your stuff together because chess is your purpose and you know it and it's time to start acting like it. It was that kind of thing. But then like everyone's sort of patting me on the back, like, hey, Danny, good job. And like chess is Danny's purpose. And I was immediately started to be used as like, well, you see Danny's performing in his purpose. Why aren't you performing in yours? Or like, hey, like there are only a couple kids, who are really up to purpose at this level. Danny's one of them. Right. And so I immediately was put on like a not happy pedestal, right? It was like a very awkward thing in terms of my relationships with my friends and my peers, especially the chess guys, my chess friends. But it also was this thing that made me special, right? And so that became the thing that I also hung my hat on. But to answer your question, the reason the chess kids were really into traveling is because we got to eat fast food. And if you're a kid living, we weren't even on food stamps, right? We were right. on on rice and bean buckets, right? Going to McDonald's and traveling the world was the biggest perk. And in addition to the curriculum that the kids had, the motivation we had to be good at chess, because if you were not good, you got kicked off the team. Like it was legit. Like kids were being kicked off the team and brought back on by Stephen Camp on a regular basis. I mean, I share a story where I was kicked off the team at one point. The fear you had and the fear your family had because of their sort of spiritual standing based on your chess performance was very real. So it was both carrot and stick, right? It was both McDonald's and fast food and travel. And it was also like, if you didn't do this right, like you were kicked off the team, because the mission of the collective, like literally kind of became like, how good can this chess team get to sort of prove to the world that we're not a cult?
Right. Would it be an appropriate metaphor to say that you were being used as a pawn, dare I say?
It's not the first time that you can't resist because it's not the first time too. I was.
Sarah, it's a mom joke.
It was a chess game for Stephen Camp, and we were pieces on the board, literally.
Yeah, I feel that. Let's take a little break from the cultiverse. Here's a word from our sponsors. My friends, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it is already gift-giving season. Has anyone started yet? Well, if you haven't, don't worry, we got your back. Well, actually, MeUndies has your back and your butt. Whether it's matching undies with your partner, coordinating PJs for the family photo, or going full festive with your friend group, MeUndies makes it fun, easy, and ridiculously cozy. Their holiday prints are adorable. Their fabric is next level soft, like, did I just sit on a cloud soft? And honestly, you'll want to be caught in matching loungewear this year. Made from sustainably sourced ultramodal, these are the softest, stretchiest, happiest undies and joggers you'll ever own. Over 30 million pairs sold, 90,000 5-star reviews, and a problem-free philosophy that means if you don't love your first pair, it's on them. We personally here in the Ames family are pumped to get a matching Xmas PJ set for our family photo shoot for Instagram. And get ready, friends and family. Pretty much everyone's going to be getting special Xmas undies and boxers with reindeers and Santas. And that's just the truth. Knock out all of your holiday gifting needs today with MeUndies. To get exclusive holiday deals up to 50% off, go to MeUndies.com/culty and enter promo code culty. That's MeUndies.com/culty, promo code culty for 50% off. Happy shopping and happy holidays. Thanksgiving planning always sneaks up on us. Every year I say I'm going to get ahead of it, and then I don't. Potlucks, the big family feast. But this year I'm keeping things easy and stress-free with Whole Foods Market. It's my one-stop shop for everything I need all month long. From quality organic produce to great prices on turkey and amazing deals on baking essentials. Plus, their 365 brand always keeps my pantry stocked with the basics without breaking the budget. And for the days when life gets too busy, their grab-and-go sides are a lifesaver. The creamy mashed russet potatoes and sea salt and cracked pepper green beans are perfect for potlucks, quick dinners, or last-minute Friendsgiving plans. Nobody needs to know I didn't actually cook it myself, right? I love browsing their produce sales for fresh ingredients to make casseroles and classic sides that taste like home. And if you want to skip the cooking altogether, Whole Foods Market Catering has you covered. From turkey to dessert, all made with the same better ingredients and high standards that you'd expect. Make sure to order by November 25th to reserve your bird, your sides, and your sweets. This Thanksgiving, save more, stress less, and make it delicious. All with Whole Foods Market. Shop everything you need for Thanksgiving now at Whole Foods Market. Oh, and happy Thanksgiving.
We love electrolytes in the Ames household. When I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My energy, mood, focus, everything improves. That's why I'm excited to try Drip Drop, our newest sponsor. It's not just about thirst, it's about keeping my body and brain running at full power. If you're feeling foggy, tired, or just vaguely dehydrated from life, meet Drip Drop. It's doctor-developed, fast hydration that actually works. It's got the perfect balance of electrolytes and glucose for rapid absorption, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading sports drinks. Translation, more focus, better energy, improved mood, even that I actually slept last night glow. It's trusted by firefighters, medical pros, and top athletes, and it tastes amazing. 16 original flavors, 8 sugar, all crave-worthy. I can't wait to use it every day, morning, post-workout, or when parenting feels like a cardio class, which it does. Plus, with flexible subscriptions, you're never caught without it. Wherever you are, gym, workplace, or household chaos, just stay dripped, not dried. Right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 25% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code CULTY. That's dripdrop.com, promo code Colty for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. DripDrop.com and use promo code Colty now.
Thank you for listening. Now, let's dive back into the cultiverse.
Did you feel that way at the time? Were you introspective as you were like, I guess you were 12 at the time, or did it become that over time? Because I know how I related. I mean, I played sports at a relatively high level, and I noticed how my relationship changed with it over time until ultimately it kicked me out in my early 20s. I'm just wondering, like, how did you feel about it the entire time? Because it seems like it's something that's also a vehicle for you to experience a different lifestyle. Like you look at like the Soviets when they play basketball, they look at it as an opportunity to travel the world, but the way it's imposed on them. Were you able to recognize it at the time, or did that grow over time? What was your kind of relationship with it?
I think it's fair to say that my relationship with it at the time was, especially up until it was ordained, like from 10 to 12 for sure, it was all joy. It was all good, right? It was fast food and fun for the most part, right? Because even with the pressures of this is bigger than just a chess game, and we were both told directly and indirectly that, hey, like, you're bringing people to God when you beat them, because if people win, they get to be in their ego, and if you beat them, they have to question whether or not the Shelby School and this supposed cult is actually, maybe doing something right. So we were told that as kids, and understood that there was more at stake. And because we saw that we could get kicked off the team if things weren't going well, I want to clarify that we always knew it was more than a game, but I would say it was like 90% joy even with that, because one, we were just kids, and two, we also believed in the mission. Because remember, when you're born in it, like there was no part of us that didn't agree with Stephen Camp. Like when he would kick someone off the team, the kids were on his side, not the other kid. I mean, as long as it wasn't you, right? Or if you were like considering what was at stake spiritually, like you had been raised under the idea that Dr. Duran's trance is real, that we're not a cult. I mean, I've shared this, that at a very young age, we were sort of, educated. We were brainwashed, I would argue. We were educated to be shown what real cults were. I mean, at 7, I knew what drinking the Kool-Aid meant, like actually meant, right? Other kids don't actually know what drinking the Kool-Aid means, right? And so I was aware of Jonestown. I was aware of Waco. I was aware of Heaven's Gate. I was aware of particularly cults that had ended in like mass like suicide or tragedy, right? And I was also aware enough to know that what they were practicing was very different than us, because there wasn't extreme things like that happening. There wasn't a goal of suicide. There wasn't stuff that at least you could see in these sort of salacious documentaries. I was like, that's not what we're doing. So I was like everyone else, not just on board and excited because of chess and fast food, but I also believed in the spiritual mission, right? And so I think it's important to like frame that the answer to your question is yes. Like I saw pretty much only good. And it really wasn't until, I mean, we're obviously going to get to that. Like, how does a kid ultimately sort of participate in his own abduction unless he is on board, right? I mean, like we're gonna talk about what would happen now that the chess was ordained as my purpose, and what would become the biggest, trauma of my life. I mean, and that's saying that there's been a lot of stuff here, but what would happen with my relationship with my mom, like, doesn't happen unless not only she's on board, but I'm on board, and even if, obviously, with perspective and tears and therapy and a lot of grief, I have come to accept and forgive myself that I was a child. I was only 12 years old and 13 years old, right? But I participated in the idea that this spiritual mission of me achieving chess was more important than anything, including things that like should not ever have to be fundamentally questioned for anybody, like who their mother is or like safety. And so that answers the question, I think.
And I'll spare you going through the step-by-step of it. Whatever you feel comfortable saying, knowing that the details, and they're horrific, are in the book if people want to relive that with you. But can you give the cliff notes of how they were able to separate you from your mom?
So, again, I think now at this point, people are kind of aware that there's this belief system that says you're a spiritual being having a physical experience. Again, we've talked about maybe the empowering parts of that. What that could mean in practice was that every material and worldly idea, from your biological relationships to the home you're in, to kind of anything you're attached to that is less important than your spiritual reason for being on the planet, which we now know is my purpose, which is chess, like they are not just under the microscope as to whether they are doing good things for that purpose, but if they're ever not doing good things for that purpose, then, the question of whether they should be in your life was on the table, right? Whether biological relationships should be disposed of if they're not the most effective thing for you to achieve your purpose. And so the cliff notes of that is that my mom, on the one side, who also believed in this, to at least whatever degree she could, or she wouldn't be in the collective, was now having an understanding that Danny's purpose kind of made him really important. And in some ways, I was higher on the totem pole than even she was, right? So my mom has an appreciation for what's at stake with Danny's purpose, but then she's also now starting to be processed, which is this word where, someone is being talked to. The word process in the collective was both noun, adjective, and verb, but you could be processed. And that her process was about whether she had a perverted relationship with me. Probably about 6 months. It started when I was first moved out, but not really told I was being taken from her yet, being put with different families. The idea was my mom needed to take a break from me because it was affecting her new marriage with Dennis, who was my stepfather. She had remarried Dennis Gordon. And so she was told that, why are you holding on to Danny? Like, is it because you're still in love with Steve Rensch? That would be a pretty big sin if you're that perverted that you would hold on to your relationship with your son because you're still in love with a minister of this collective. And by the way, Dennis, how do you feel about that, Dennis? So this is like a conversation with her planting those seeds. And then on my side, like, I am being separated and essentially put in a spot where the most important relationship, regardless, is now Stephen Camp, right? He's the one who really oversees chess, and he's the one who oversees my self-worth, which is this spiritual ordainment of chess, right? One of the things was I was never allowed to even think of Steve as my father, because that would also be a spiritual sin to sort of lust or claim something that's not yours. And I was told many times that, no, Debbie and Dennis are your spiritual parents. Don't you ever even think about Steve Rensch being your father. And it became a huge source of tension between me and Dallas, my stepbrother. Like it was all kinds of just horrific in terms of what went down for kids. But now suddenly I had this seed planted that was, when you were first born, there was debate at the time about whether Steve should take you and not Debbie. He didn't do it, and that's okay. He is a very spiritual man. Like, you might need to get to know your father at some point if you're going to achieve this level of success, right? So this is just one example of like the versions we were being planted, and then
It's triangulation.
I'm trying to explain how could such a thing come to be where then a 13-year-old boy would sit across from his mother and have one of the most heartbreaking conversations, in mother-son history, where I told her through gritted teeth that I was essentially done with her. And then she said, well, that's okay because I need to protect my marriage. And then we're both like crying while we're saying this to each other. And then I kind of break a little bit and go like, well, how long is this? Like the little kid, it goes like, so what are we doing here, right? And she said, you need to pack your bag like it's forever. And I threw stuff in my garbage bag and sobbed my way out the door as my father, who I've never talked to in my life, really, besides like one conversation, picks me up and takes me. And I don't even end up living really with him in Marlow. I end up being orphaned in the Valley, which is where the collective had a couple houses, because that was the easiest place for me to travel and do chess. And Stephen Camp was de facto my parent. And I would learn later, the thing that is maybe more heartbreaking than any of it was that my 7-year-old sister, Debbie and Dennis, adopted a girl named Noelle. She's my sister. And she saw the whole thing. And she said the moment I left, my mom like collapsed to the floor and was literally screaming bloody murder. Like, they took Danny.
There's no words for that. It's awful.
You must feel, tell me if I'm wrong, but that must be like the hardest thing to try to explain, especially to people who don't have the cult background knowledge, and that just must seem so absurd to them. And
he's just gut wrenching.
Well, it's gut wrenching on any level. It's just to have to try to explain requires all this backstory, all this indoctrination, and all this belief for anyone to even understand how that could even be remotely something that you would agree to, even though you didn't really want to agree to it, but you outwardly agreed to it, which most people don't understand either. There's like the cult persona, and then there's like your inner voice.
It's coercion. That's
you're being coerced. Yeah, you're being coerced.
It's coercion through triangulation, and
it's
so
the hardest in memory to. I've obviously done a lot of work on this. It's the one memory that you can tell is the hardest one to relive. It's the one memory that is, because there's just that never should have happened. It's the thing that when you have kids, and I look across the table at my 13-year-old daughter, and I think about what Danny was doing at 13 and the type of conversations he was having spiritually, it's kind of mind blowing. You know what I mean? It just and to think about, and so obviously in the first part of this, two-parter, assuming people listen, now they understand a little more of the context of when I said that when I later had my own kids, my wife and I had 2 boys first. Even the whiff of being told that maybe my kid wasn't my spiritual kid was enough for me to to pull the rug the other way or whatever, like to, and so that was,
Right.
but yeah, as I share in the book, 3 years later, when Trina Camp took me to see my mom and she was drunk, and it led to all these weird tensions again over, who really was Danny's parents. It forced me in hindsight to re-up my own covert contract, because a lot of these cults work, I've talked about it, they work effectively with covert contracts, which, just to explain what my therapist terminology is there, is that when you get someone to sign something they didn't agree to, or in some ways it can be, relationships can have bad covert contracts. Like I've learned that a covert contract is anytime you're expecting someone to do something that they didn't actually say they were going to do, right? And you're holding them to a covert contract, which can be an unhealthy thing for you to do in a relationship versus just saying,
we know nothing about that over
here. Or you signed a covert contract and you didn't know it, right? You committed yourself to something and gave away your agency when you didn't even know that you did. And the more times you can get someone in one of these groups to sort of re-sign up, the harder it is for them to break. And it's a thing a lot of people who didn't grow up in cults or didn't have that experience, they don't understand, right? They go, how can smart, amazing, intelligent, curious people end up in these groups and then stay there? And what you don't understand if you haven't lived that is that, when the emotional manipulations are happening and, things that you think are like not up for question are based on the leaders of a collective kind of running it. And you're sort of signing a covert contract that as long as you don't do things the wrong way, they're going to let you have these basic things. It's very difficult to then reclaim the basic things that you kind of gave away. You gave away those things many, many times, even though you didn't know you were doing it. And so in some ways, seeing my mom 3 years later and having a very short conversation was really hard, because then when we split up again, it's like I doubled down on my heartache and my anger at her for doing it again, even though I didn't even know that it happened again, right? And she doubled down that, well, I think this actually is the best thing for him. And so we would not have another conversation until 7 years later. Really, it was 10 years in total until my mom and I would even begin to kind of heal our relationship.
Wow.
Your mom. I just wanted, like the whole time in the book, I just wanted to hug you both and bring you together. And obviously you had what you had, which is heartbreaking in and of itself, but we'll save that for the end and also for people to read the book. Your whole chess career obviously deserves its own podcast. Tell us about Igor.
Let's do a quick Igor.
Very quick. One of the things that happened was, while I was essentially orphaned, supposed to be Stephen Marlowe's kid, my father, who wasn't my father, Stephen Camp oversees me. One of the things Stephen Camp did was he brought in Igor Ivanov to the collective, who was a wayward international chess master, traveling, racist, Russian, abusive alcoholic is who he was. And he joined the collective, and I got a lot of, inappropriate lessons from Igor, but he also became the most consistent person in my life there for a couple of years. And Igor is interesting to touch on, one, because he himself is fascinating as a character. And like you said, the Audible has my impressions of Igor. I think I'm going to leave that for the Audible. I'll let them listen. But Igor also was interesting because he never stopped challenging the fact that I was taken from my mom. And it consistently became this like source of tension in our relationship, where he saw me kind of fully indoctrinated on this idea. And every once in a while he would break and be like, you need to go talk to your mother. And I'm like, I have talked to Marlo. He's like, I'm talking about your real mother, Debbie. And so Igor was an interest. I think one of the things that left such a soft spot, despite the fact that he was abusive in many ways, and it was sometimes cruel, and he was also inappropriate and drunk and naked. And the book has a bunch of weird stories people should read. But I think the part of Igor that also saw how much pain I was in, endeared ourselves to each other. And we spent a lot of time together playing lots of blindfold chess, which is something I got really good at. He and I, spent a lot of time together, and eventually he moved on and left the collective for his own reasons. But yeah, so that's a wild story. So people who want to know more about Igor Ivanov, that's a worthy one. But what I would say is, again, it's impossible to get into all the internal dynamics of what tore this group apart. But the reason I touch on that before getting to kind of my final moments is I think it's important to set the stage of, I would argue, two things ultimately were never going to work. One was the generation of people who joined the collective were not the generation of people born into the collective. And I think they forgot one really important thing about the human experience, which is that they were finding their own way, either against or in curiosity, searching for things that were their own outside of the, traditional denominations of their parents, right? And there was this like expectation of the younger generation that you would be born not just into communism, but the idea that you're not pursuing your own kind of thing, regardless of like whether you keep the money you make, in and of itself, I think just like counter to what people really want. And I think that there are all kinds of reasons why altruistically I can think of wanting to be a socialist for the whole planet and things I would love to solve about poverty and hunger and all those things. But when it comes to like the individual pursuit of excellence, like it was really difficult to expect a bunch of people, not just a chess prodigy who was told his purpose, like to kind of like stay on path in a way that I think was forever. Because also the parents see that, because so at some point the parents have their kids and they want to support their kid in ballet, in chess, in to become a doctor, to go to an expensive school. So it wasn't just that they underestimated that their kids would want something different, but that they would want something different for their kids. And so that rift started happening more naturally. And then money, right? Really, it comes down to money, which regardless of all the other dysfunctional things, men marrying younger women, abuse that happened, and there are things in the book that people can read. I think fundamentally, when that generation started to come into money, the first rift was like people broke into pods where they weren't all merged anymore, but they were merged within a pod, and every pod paid a tithe to Stephen and Trina so that they could still provide the trance service for everyone. So that was like the first thing. Then after pods became like, demerge, where people could be demerged and isolated, but still have their own money, but still pay for trance or pay tithe. But then at some point, the whole question of, is this a spiritual service or is this a business, would come into question. People would keep coming to trance even after they stopped paying tithe. So then Stephen Camp would like eventually confront them in public ways. And so things just started imploding. And I think my experience, whether I'm proud of this or not, like I don't know that I consider myself someone who left the collective. I consider myself someone who learned to live within the eye of the hurricane. I think what happened for me is, as I had my wife and 2 babies, I saw like some really dangerous hypocrisies happening. I was also still scared, and also maybe to some degree, until this moment with Stephen Camp that I'm going to share about, I still believed in some of the lie. I still believed and I was loved and that I was special to him and different things. And despite all of that messed up stuff that got me there, it wasn't until I healed my relationship with my mom, and then I lost my mom tragically to a stroke. That's kind of just so you know, we don't have a happy ending with me and my mom in that way. We have a very happy ending in terms of healing our relationship that I'm forever grateful for. But then I lost my mom in a very sudden fashion, which is also devastating as a young man who had just healed his relationship to now lose his mom. And so when that went down and I lost my mom after all this work, and I saw the hypocrisies, I found a way to kind of live within my own bubble where I was still actively tithing, even though I wasn't even going to trance anymore. I was actively tithing because I think, like a lot of people, like tithe to churches long after maybe they feel like they should have. I also was seeing certain parts of the community school that my wife was teaching at that I wanted to support. And so I think that if I'm really honest with myself, the reason it took that sort of blow up with Stephen Camp for me to actually leave and really turn away is because there was a part of me that still wanted to believe in the lie, that he did love me like I was his kid, right? And so what ended up happening was we had spent years now after my mom and I healed our relationship, really around the age of 25, 26. We got a couple years together, and then when I was 28, she had a massive stroke. And so we were living in our own bubble. We had our kids. My wife taught at the community school, which from our view was still doing a lot of good. At this point, it wasn't just kids for the community. It was a lot of kids in the general Payson area. I had my own job at chess.com. We lived in our own island, and the pandemic hit. And right at that time, the school shuts down. All the schools shut down. So we're sort of no longer needing to be in the village for the school. Then, tragically, and I'm just going to share the whole thing, this is another bond my wife and I share. So now we have 2 fathers who left their wives to marry the young daughters of Stephen and Trina. And then my wife's mother gets stage 4 breast cancer in February 2020 and dies in June of 2020. So she died at 62. My mom died at 64. So suddenly overnight, chess.com, as anyone who's followed the chess world, is doing this with the pandemic, with the Queen's Gambit show on Netflix. Sort of overnight, it wasn't just that we were like making good money. It was like something had just changed, and we were like fundamentally like, I have to hold on to this now. It wasn't even about money. It was like chess.com needs a lot of focus. Before that, I was coaching middle school basketball with my boys. Like, it was like chess.com needed focus. Both of our moms had now died. And because my wife was grieving, I offered to take Stephen Camp the tithe check. which again, every time I talk about this, it sounds weird because people go like, how is this guy still tithing? And I show up at his door and he's like, oh, I haven't seen you in a while. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, good to see you. And normally Shauna had been taking the tithe tick, just to explain, probably because maybe I knew that the last time I saw him, it might not go well. And I had a lot of anger and heartache about how they had handled my mom's death, where I felt like nobody was really there for us. The promise of the collective really was not there when you needed them most. And so I had kind of been avoiding all of this. My wife had taken on that burden. She dealt with him more regularly because of the school. Because she wasn't up to it that day, I take the check and he hands me back a box of pictures. And I look at the pictures and it's me and my wife and our kids and every holiday card we've ever given him, and also pictures of my siblings. And I saw, like, in that moment what he was doing. It was literally, it was a final, like, covert contract, like, gambit, because he gives me the box and he's like, well, I figure you don't want me to have these anymore because we're not actually family. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I love you. Like, these are your pictures. I gave them to you. Like, if you don't want pictures of my kids, like, that's weird, but they're your pictures. And he's like, no, well, why would I want these? Like, we're not family. And what he wanted me to do, the gambit, is for me to say, like, why do you think that? I'm sorry, I haven't seen you in so long. It's been 6 months. You're right. I'm sorry. Of course we're family. You want to have a drink? Let's have a drink on the porch. Like, let's hang out. Like, this is what he wanted, right? And instead, I literally, like, threw the box in his face, and I threw the check at Grandma Trina and said, this is your last fucking tithe check, Trina. Like, I'm done. And I walked out. And I don't share the details after that, but she called me. Like, they did every effort they could to sort of, like, keep us around. He tried to apologize and different things, but that was the last time I really had an interaction with him. And I saw him a little bit later when we were moving, and I shared that in the book as well. But that was basically it.
Even cult podcasts need sponsors, everyone. Check out these must-haves.
Is anyone else feeling like this year is flying by way too fast? Where did the time go? Anxiety is real, and it can leave you feeling scattered and behind. Calm gives you permission to slow down, even when everything else is speeding up. Calm is the #1 app for sleep and meditation, and it's here to help you feel better. When the ups and downs start feeling more like a roller coaster with no seatbelt, Calm has your back. You can pop into a quick guided meditation to ease anxiety, refocus your brain, or just remember to breathe. Or if sleep's been a challenge, Calm's got sleep stories, meditation, and music that will send you into the deepest slumber. There are even grounding exercises for those who just want to run away and live in the woods. And expert-led talks to help with everything from grief and self-esteem to relationships, aka the hard stuff they don't teach you in school. The Calm app puts all of it right in your pocket, so relief is just a tap away. With over 2 million 5-star reviews, Calm is helping people stress less, sleep more, and actually enjoy being human again. Imagine all of that without joining a cult. Calm your mind, change your life. Calm has an exclusive offer just for listeners of our show. Get 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/culty. This is an amazing value. Go to calm.com/culty for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. Calm.com/culty. And tell Calm you heard about them from us.
You hear that? That's not just a Toyota truck. That's the sound of no crowds, no alerts, no distractions, and no telling what you'll find next. You know, like a detour. So why would you ever take a tour when you could take a detour? Toyota trucks.
As a busy parent, it's been such a game changer to do our weekly food shopping with Hungry Root. Hungry Root plans all our meals for the week, shops for us, and delivers groceries that fit our health goals, dietary preferences, and budget. Let's be honest, this time of year, our brains are maxed out. Between the podcast, the new book, holidays, kids' football, and trying to remember everyone's preferences, meal planning just is not happening. That's where Hungry Roots saved the day and helped us eat well and reach our health goals. Take their quiz. And their Smart Cart tech builds out groceries and recipes that fit your taste, goals, and schedule. We're talking 15,000 chef-created recipes, many ready in under 15 minutes, and over 1,000 grocery items from trusted brands. Everything meets super high ingredient standards, no weird additives, no junk. Just real food that tastes amazing. My personal favorite is how Hungry Root knows us so well, like a great personal shopper. They sent us delicious grilled turkey tenderloin with pesto veggies and our favorite snack from Lesser Evil. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/culty and use code culty. That's hungryroot.com/culty. Code culty to get 40% off your first box and free item of your choice for life. Sponsor break's done. Now back for more culty stories.
It's so rare that members get to have that final fuck you. And I think any of our survivor ex-members of different groups will feel satisfied that you got to have that last word. I'm glad you did. As painful as it might be.
It's painful, right? It's funny because at the time, what are you doing? Like, you're actually judging yourself. You're like thinking there like, oh, is this really it? I mean, I have had so much self-worth wrapped up in whether I've really just become what Stephen Camp said I would be all along, which is, you're just a man of the world now. It's just about money, right? Yep. You and your wife have left the teaching. And so I guess you'll re-embody over this, right? Next lifetime. Like those voices are in my head because I saw him do it to everybody else. And it was a threat consistently to me and us, right? And so in that moment, it feels liberating. And the truth is, when I talk about it now, I feel like I have even more perspective of how effective he was at that type of thing, where he got people to re-sign up. And so those things have been very hard for me to frankly swallow, because I think for years I was on the side of the thing where I was like, yeah, he did some harm, but he was trying to do good and he didn't want to be a cult leader. And then I think with time and perspective and education and just seeing some of the tactics used and then also hearing stories, which is like he tried to have his oldest son read the 48 Laws of Power, which is a book where you talk about how to manipulate people if you've never seen this book. And the amount of things in there that like I saw him practice like were heartbreaking, because this is a man who I love. Who literally, I mean, yes, he is the architect of all these horrible things that happen, but it was over like his love of chess and the fact that he thought I was special in chess that ironically put me on a path where chess could become what it is for me today. And so I've had this like very, very just fucked up relationship with the man, right? And so, but as I saw more of those behaviors and I kind of came to terms with how premeditated that type of stuff really was, it has been devastating. It has been maybe more heartbreaking than believing that maybe it was an accident, right? Or that even if it was fucked up that he orchestrated this, he did it because he thought it was good, right? You sort of check all these boxes. And I am a person who fundamentally believes that sometimes people are trying to do good and bad things happen. And I try to see the best in everybody. I'm also someone who believes in the other twist ending, which is even more fucked up, which is maybe sometimes people are trying to do bad and it ends up being good for someone, which is an even weirder thing. When you've done the work to kind of gain perspective and you've healed to the best degree you have, even if you're healing your relationships with people who are no longer here, my mom, you heal your relationships with people from afar in your own way without them having to actually change. You've changed your relationship with the person or the thing, right?
Yeah.
And when you do that, you don't get to rewrite the past along the way, right? So it's hard, yeah.
Yeah, you know, Danny, to your point, like with people like Steve, I think people who are optimistic about humanity don't take into account that that's what people like Steve, you know, thrive on, because it's very hard for someone like you to project that kind of malevolence into a psychology like that and then believe it. And for me, I don't know if you're in your journey, but for me, that was one of the things that I had to reconcile. Like I flirted with a dark force, you know, and didn't see it until I did, because I wasn't willing to see that kind of darkness existed. Yeah, my wife always says, you know, we assume everyone else is thinking and feeling what we are, right? So it takes a lot to kind of like separate that. And I guess what the thing is, though, I would still choose to be that optimist, right? I would choose to be the person who does that. And so just sometimes there's just wiser about it, right?
Yeah. I'm always curious as to when did the cult word come into your, like, how did you unravel all that stuff, and what's your journey been like?
It's funny because I think in some ways I was still debating whether I was going to name it a cult when I started writing the book 4 years ago. And I had a lot of carried over inertia because of that. One of the reasons I have avoided calling it a cult for so long is because of my education as a kid, where I saw the association people made with Jonestown and Waco and Heaven's Gate. And I felt protective, even as I became aware that it was fucked up and that it wasn't okay. I felt protective over the word because of the association I saw people make. So I avoided that, and I didn't want that. The other reason was actually very practical, which was my last name is Rensch. It's a unique spelling. My dad's last name is Rensch, and many people believe that Steve Rensch was like the leader of the collective. My dad, in many ways, was one of the most publicly known people from the Church of Immortal Consciousness. His name is associated with all the lawsuits and all the things. And my kids actually did go through this in Payson. Like, I didn't want them to get unnecessary like interrogation. Like, hey, are you from the cult? Like, your name is Rensch. Like, and so my oldest son had already started dealing with that, which had nothing to do with why we moved. But in some ways, it's something I'm actually grateful for as far as why we did move, which is now 5 going on 6 years since we moved to Utah. Do I name it for what it is, a cult? I feel determined to do so. And part of that is because, I genuinely feel that writing my book was not the closing of a chapter. It's the starting of a conversation that needs to be had. No one has really had the opportunity to share about what it was to be raised in the Church of Immortal Consciousness, which later became the Church of the Spirit. A lot of people don't even know that. I don't have to be ashamed about what went down, including my own behavior, where, as I share in the book, I was not the best husband or father. I mean, how could I be given what I went through? But I don't even say that as like a victim. I take responsibility that at one point
Sure.
I was a wounded person capable of wounding others. And I think it takes a long time for wounded people to really be providing healing for others versus potentially wounding them. And you have to do the work of being honest, of naming your experience and sort of taking back your power, including your own mistakes, if you hope to do the thing, which is share your experience in a way that heals and helps others versus, your truth comes out sideways because you're just a damaged person who people have a hard time dealing with because you're a fucking wreck, right? I've been that person. And my wife always says the truth comes out no matter what. You decide if it's straight or sideways. The reason I told my story, the reason I wrote this book was not to submit yet another piece of salacious scandal into the world. Like, I wrote this story because I wanted people to see the redemption arc of what is possible if you actually embrace that you are not what happens to you, you are what you choose to become. And that in a weird fucking twist ending, I'm telling a story that, by the way, at the end of my book, thanks Stephen Camp for his love of chess, whether you believe in that or not. Because my belief is that human beings live in the gray and that we spend way too much time putting everything in black or white, good or bad, right or wrong, and that actually these groups exist because of the ability to manipulate people in the gray. And smart people can be taken advantage of. And so I wanted to share to say we are not what happens. We are what we choose to become. There's a redemption arc here, regardless of the abuse. And I hope people read my book and say, that was fucked up, but maybe I should call my mom, who I haven't talked to in 3 years.
Yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
want people to read it and go, yeah, that was fucked up. So what I'm saying is I'm not denying the drama or the scandal or the salaciousness, but I'm not telling that in a way to fracture. I'm telling that because I hope people read it and then say, things that are fucked up do happen, but I haven't talked to my dad in a few years. Maybe I will make that phone call. Like, that's my goal with my story, not to cast more dispersions or to talk, shit gossip about another cult.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and that to me is what you captured. Like, yes, the Igor story had a little bit of comic relief, and he was a character that on first blush you might dismiss, but you were able to really articulate how he did have your back in a way, and you caught it, and he left a very valuable impression on you in spite of all his abusiveness and his inability to take care of himself and his shortcomings. He through all of it as a human story too, because he told you to go talk to your mom and like looked out for you and had love for you in his way. And I think you were able to encapsulate that. To me, that's, all the, Russian accent and stuff aside, that part of the book was done. I was like, it was moving for me in a lot of ways.
I was tremendously moved by the whole thing, especially, but really summarizing what you just said, I think is so important. I definitely called my mom immediately. But
She called you.
No, she may have called me. But just that perspective shift is always so meaningful and so useful, but also just how, from our point of view, how exciting that a whole different world, the chess world, is now learning about cults, because that's sort of our main talking point now is no one's immune to, it doesn't have to be a full-blown destructive suicide cult. It can be a small little collective that has its perks and also its downsides. And let's teach people what it looks like so they can see and feel and understand. And the chess world probably wouldn't have known about that had you not been willing to share it. So I think it's really commendable that you're digging up such a hard part of your life so that people can learn, whether it's about their families or cults or chess. It's just such a robust book.
Thank you.
And web series.
First of all, how often do you eat steak? That's what I really want to know.
Not that often anymore, because I'm a pretty balanced diet. Too much red meat, but I probably have steak like at least once every 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't have enough red meat in your.
Yeah. Anyone who hasn't read the book, you have to read the book to know the answer to that.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so we've left this to the end. So this is where our cult worlds collide.
Okay, I can't wait.
Yes. So I don't know how much you know about NXIVM, but Vanguard, Keith Raniere, the Stephen Camp of our group, used to have these 10-day retreats in the Adirondacks. And it changed over the 12 years. In the beginning, it was actually pretty fun. We would have like hypnotists and like motivational speakers. It was adult camp. We would do yoga. There was dance parties. It got worse over the years, like it less fun because somebody took over it. That wasn't a very,
well, it was just,
whatever.
It's how cults go.
It's just how cults go. But in the early years, and I think right to the end, we had a chess grandmaster come and do blindfolded chess. I believe he's a grandmaster. I'm going to get his title wrong. And you mentioned him in your book. And I want to just preface by saying that he was not part of our cult. He was hired to be the chess guy and like provide entertainment. Do you know who it is?
I have no idea who it is. I'm trying to think. I mentioned him in the book. I don't know. You have to tell me.
I'll tell you. It was Maurice Ashley.
Oh my gosh. Maurice Ashley. Of course I know Maurice. Maurice is a legend. I text Maurice all the time.
You'll have to tell him, text him.
You're on our podcast.
That you were on the podcast about NXIVM. Keith Raniere, I don't think I ever saw him play chess, but we were told he was like some whatever.
That's total bullshit.
Yeah, I'm sure he was not very good at chess. He was probably too busy
Okay.
doing other things.
Doing bad things.
Playing the Queen's Gambit.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God, Maurice. That is so, I would not have guessed Maurice, but it also makes sense because Maurice is the type of charismatic grandmaster you would want to lead an adult camp getaway because he's great. Like Maurice is such an entertainer and he's awesome.
Awesome guy. Really good.
And Maurice is obviously someone who inspired me in terms of, being a young guy looking at what chess commentary could be. Maurice is literally a legend. By the way, he came to our company meetup last year. Maurice is actually a good friend. So this is like amazing. And
this is amazing.
What a human being he is. And he came to our company meetup last year, and he's actually very busy right now because the U.S. Championship is happening in St. Louis. For those who want to know anything about the chess world, Maurice Ashley is doing commentary every day right now on the internet for the U.S. Championship. But that is amazing, and I cannot wait to tell him.
Please tell him. He'll definitely not remember meeting me because I didn't play any chess.
I knew him a little bit because one of our friends, and he played volleyball with us in New York City one day, and he hurt his back. And I remember helping him. Okay, hurt his back. Yeah.
But I just remember him like he
awesome.
He was really awesome, and for sure he wasn't part of any of the bad stuff. And he was probably paid a good amount to come. Like people were paid to come and like entertain us and do things for us. So no shade to him at all.
That's amazing.
Yeah. What a small little culty world. Yeah. And, obviously there were so many, just to wrap this up, there's so many things that we didn't get into, your struggles with OCD and anxiety and substance abuse and how you got through all that and how
you got to read the book.
Came out the other side and are able to have this conversation with so much articulate observation about your journey. It just blows me away. I was emotional reading it. I'm emotional talking to you. I'm just so proud of you. And I hope we can keep in touch.
Thank you, Sarah. And my wife's a big fan of this podcast. I think I told you that texting. So I think we will stay in touch. But she said to tell Sarah and Nippy I say hi. So her name's Shauna.
Yes.
So she says hi.
We love Shauna.
Hi, Shauna. And if you're in Atlanta, hit us up.
And we're sending Shauna a little bit culty fanny pack and you a little bit culty hat so you can rep out in the world. And we're really glad that
for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just so grateful for your work. So all the best on whatever's next. All right, everybody, that is the end of our second part with Danny Rensch. What did you enjoy about that, Nip?
I mean, we could have gone so many directions with that. I don't think we did Igor justice. Everyone, please, the book. It's so loaded, and he tackles so many different things so extremely well. And puts, for me, because we've done over 250 episodes, he puts new language to stuff. And it's always surprising to get new language and new descriptions.
Especially about cult stuff?
Yeah.
Can I be totally honest about something?
No. What have you done so far?
When I got the email from his PR team pitching Danny to be on the show, my first thought was, okay, this is a chess story that happened to have like a cult aspect that, I don't know, I just feel like there's people who are kind of jumping on the cult bandwagon because it's sort of trendy to have been in a cult these days.
No, I didn't get any of that.
But then I read his book and I thought, no, this is legit. This is legit.
Also, like, it's a love story to chess and how chess kind of got him out of it. And it's just...
and a love story with Shauna.
Yeah.
I really hope they get to go on their honeymoon.
Yeah. Maybe to Atlanta.
I have never rooted for someone's success more than Danny's and could not have been.
By the way, the fact that chess...
blew
up when it did. And he's hit 777s. That was the best part. We didn't get really to talk about that, but that was pretty awesome.
I think he's so fascinating. I also, one thing I didn't mention because we were running out of time is that he talked about catching Steve Camp's gambit. And I thought, wow, the strategy that Danny must have in terms of like seeing people's moves must be next level.
Mm-hmm.
I also didn't get a chance to brag that I apparently played chess when I was little. And I used to call the night the dark, says my mother. Do you think he would have been interested in that?
I don't know. I'm not. If I'm being totally honest.
I learned so much about cults, even though I thought I knew everything. I learned so much about chess. What a bonus. My cup is filled, and we hope that you enjoyed this episode and his book as much as we did. Thank you, Danny.
Bye-bye.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
We hope you're enjoying A Little Bit Culty. If so, please do show us some love. Drop a rating or leave a review. Hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/alittlebitculty.
Even better, send this episode to someone who needs it. Maybe they're in a cult. Maybe they're just a little bit susceptible. Or maybe they just love a good story. Spread the word, spread the love. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
A Little Bit Culty is a Trace 120 production.
Executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames in collaboration with producer Will Rutherford at Citizens of Sound. Our co-creator is Jess Temple Tardy.
Our production coordinator is Leslie Dinsmore.
Writing by Sandra Namoto and social media marketing by Eric Swarzinski and Brooke Keene.
Our theme song Cultivated is by the artists John Bryant and Nigel Aslan.